Hey guys, Mr. Happy here. This video is going to be about PvP in Final Fantasy XIV, and it's not going to be a guide on how to do well like I usually do. Instead, this is going to be my feedback on PvP's current implementations, things I'd like to see added to it in the future, and things I would like to stop seeing in it. This is a bit of a rant, but I have organized my thoughts somewhat, so don't worry. Now let me just say that I look for very specific features when I decide how to enjoy PvP in a game. I love PvPing with or against friends in particular, and I usually prefer battlegrounds to arenas, though I definitely enjoy the usual higher learning curve of arena-based gameplay as well. Now, with the knowledge that Frontlines is being planned for a future patch, a zone reminiscent of Realm vs. Realm vs. Realm in Dark Age of Camelot, or more recently, World vs. World in Guild Wars 2, I am going to try and stick to the current core PvP principles in hope that that's going to dictate a little bit of what I expect in Frontlines. What I don't like about PvP, gonna talk about that, and how I'd like to see it improved. I do ask that anyone with an opinion, please voice it in the comments below as well. Agree or disagree, doesn't matter. So first, let me just say that when I do play in the Wolves' Den, I do generally have a good time. There's nothing wrong with the actual combat aspect in my opinion, but there's a lot of restrictions in the system that prevent me from enjoying it really. So the first thing I want to talk about, and it's one thing I really don't like, is the leveling system for PvP. Now you start at rank 1 and have to play thousands upon thousands of PvP matches and win them to reach the max level, which up until patch 2.25 was rank 30. This system, at first glance, it doesn't seem so bad. I mean, you implement the rank system so that players can attempt to learn and gear up in PvP before they eventually move on to a more competitive matchmaking scene, maybe something with ELO and ranked teams, right? Well, this system has the grind, but just wants you to know that's all it is. When rank 30 was the max PvP rank, it was pretty much dictated that unless you just wanted to aimlessly PvP without much of a competitive reason to do so, that you were done PvPing once you hit that rank and got all your gear. Other than having the ability to equip any PvP gear and have your final PvP spec for a single job, which I'll touch on later, it bolstered no meaningful reward. There's no ELO-based PvP to enrich the competitive nature of this arena-style combat. It's basically just a short team deathmatches in most cases. Don't get me wrong, anyone who has played an ELO-based solo queue PvP game, such as League of Legends, knows that that system comes with a plethora of its own problems. But it does give meaning, I guess, to the PvP, and it does have room for advancement, something that I feel is severely lacking right now in Final Fantasy XIV PvP. So what did they do? Instead of working on a more competitive scene at max rank, they instead just added more ranks for us to grind, again with no real reward at the end except better gear and abilities. If someone has already taken the time to play a few thousand games to reach rank 30, what is the actual incentive that they have other than to grind out some more vanity gear to do the next 10 ranks, which, by the way, take way too long to do anyway. I think my friend said it takes about 1,400 solo queue wins in order to get from rank 30 to 40 alone. And without the demand for PvP, those queues can be anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes unless you're a healer. The ranking system also greatly restricts matchmaking opportunities. It's reasonable to say that it'd be pretty unfair to be a rank 1 and to be placed against a rank 30. But there isn't an overly high demand for PvP, so to have a reasonable queue time, these players pretty much have to get matched up against each other. I believe it's normal to have gear differentials in PvP, but to also differ people based on rank, which thus means not only do you have less gear, but less PvP abilities than your opponent, makes the barriers for entry on PvP higher than they would be in most games. So overall, I feel that this ranking up system provides too many barriers for entry, in the forms of both gear and abilities. It limits matchmaking, which can slow down the experience as a whole, and it's just too much of a grind for the wrong reasons. I would love to throw away a ton of my time into the Wolves' Den, but right now, there's just another grind. That's just all it is. And I would prefer if they stopped increasing the ranks and just gated new gear behind farming wolf marks, the currency for PvP gear, which does also take quite a bit of time. Now next, I want to talk about the actual queuing system, which also has its own problems. Specifically, I want to talk about the limitations on the queuing system. Now, for those of you who don't know, the solo queue system is I won't want to say fine, but it's there. You pick a role and queue for levels 30, 40, or 50 PvP matches, depending on what level range you are or prefer to play at. From what I understand, to avoid high gear gaps, there are people who tend to queue at ranks at level 30 and 40 PvP quite often in order to rank up. After queuing for all three multiple times, 30, 40, and 50 solo queue, I can tell you that I was placed into these ranks far more often than the level 50 matches, so that probably holds some merit. On top of that, each group must be made up of one tank, one healer, one melee DPS, and one ranged DPS. So DPS queues on PvP can suck way more depending on your data center. I'll bring this up again in a bit. Now for me, the biggest problem with the queuing system doesn't come from its solo queue aspect, but from queuing as groups. Now, one of the most common things people will do to gain an advantage over another team in solo queue is to queue as one DPS, one tank, and one healer all together as friends, and then get only one random pickup DPS, whichever DPS you needed to fill up, melee or ranged. This allows them to better coordinate and put up a much stronger fight against most of their opponents, which are either A, made up of complete solo queue players, or is just another group doing the same things in most cases. While queuing as 2 or 3 people into solo queue match does reduce how much PvP, EXP, and wolf marks that you get, it does generally result in more victories. This causes a lot of issues for true solo queue PvP players who usually get dominated by not being able to coordinate their teamwork as effectively as the other team. And this problem stems from the ultimate problem. Queuing as 4 is damn near pointless. There is one final queue for level 50 players to queue as, where they can go in as 4 people, which will always put you up against another pre-made group of 4. I can tell you that since PvP launched, I've tried queuing for this multiple times, including after patch 2.25, where there's been a recent resurgence in PvP interest, and almost no one does it. Why? Because the rewards for abusing the triple man solo queue aspect of grinding are far better than queuing as a group of 4. It completely negates any desires anyone has to use that final queue. Why go up against another group of 4 for not necessarily small EXP and marks, but less overall for the time that you're going to spend in the queues, when I could just get faster queues and easier wins against solo queue players? There just needs to be more motivation to do these 4-man queues. This largely stems from the lack of an actual matchmaking system like I mentioned back in the PvP leveling section. It also doesn't quite help that the predetermined meta of one tank, one healer, one melee DPS, and one ranged DPS is still upheld in these 4-man queues. You have to abide by those setups. I get it. It's for balancing issues, but instead of balancing jobs, they're balancing what you're actually allowed to bring to the table. It's a super lame restriction. As a bard, I pretty much have no use for full Requiem unless my white mage or my scholar is going to be DPSing, because I can't ever play with a black mage or summoner. And it prevents, in this case, a monk from ever playing with a dragoon. I would maybe be okay with disallowing for 2 of the same jobs, so you couldn't do something like, I don't know, 4 black mage swift cast flare, or go up against 4 summoners each multi-dotting you, which I don't care how good of a healer you are, that's gonna suck. But that's just a lazy way of avoiding balancing PvP in favor of just flat out telling you what you can and cannot play. And the final point I want to make is about the demand for PvP. Was it really all there? I get that most MMOs launch with PvP, and to not have it would be a crutch, basically. Final Fantasy XIV didn't launch with it because they were focused on core gameplay and story and things like that. But how much were players clamoring for PvP? Even then, assuming 10 to 15% of the player base was really asking hardcore, which I think is a fair amount. I think that's actually more than is actually interested in PvP. Is it really wise to place so much restrictions on it for those people, or to release without the intention of taking the balancing seriously? My co-host on FFXIV Reborn, Michael Byrne, which is our Final Fantasy XIV podcast, has said it before. If you're going to put development into PvP, don't just half-ass it and make it a distraction. Make it something people will enjoy. Now, there is a lot that can be done to improve PvP, and I hope the developers understand that. Yoshi P himself said he loves PvP, so I'm hoping that he is looking into making some improvements so we can actually have PvP that we enjoy. Because as cool as Frontline sound, if they put in as much work there as they did to the Wolf's Den, it'll be just another short distraction with no real meaning. That is my honest opinion about PvP in Final Fantasy XIV thus far. be sure to leave your comments below so that, well, just in case this video ever gets passed on to the development team at any point, we have a bunch of our thoughts put together. I know a lot of you out there either don't care for PvP or would like to see it improved, so definitely be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Also, feel free to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. There's more Final Fantasy XIV videos on my YouTube channel. Also, be sure to like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, and you can follow me on Twitch where I do live stream occasionally. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.